Good afternoon, my dear. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. I really appreciate it. Now, introduce yourself. Tell us your name, where you're from, what you do for work, and what your views are on mental health.
Okay, so my name is Laura Pressman McNamara, only because my husband forced me to take his last name after we were married for 10 years because he had, a little problem with the masculinity thing. Anyway, um, I am old. I'm 59, and I've been a social worker since 1994. I now work in a trauma program, which is always what I've wanted to do. I have always seen working in mental health as working with people with trauma. Mental health is critical. It's just part of our lives. And if we deny it, that's shame on us, right? So it's really just a shame that it still has a stigma, that that we don't acknowledge the impact that it has on all of us. And I think now more people are becoming aware because since COVID and everything else, people are realizing that, wow, stress really does stuff to your body. Imagine that. Yeah. So and I've also always been like a justice advocate, whatever, social justice warrior. I've always been involved in like advocating, worked with HIV and AIDS and
Wow.
Israel and politics and all that kind of stuff. So I have a big mouth.
Wow.
For other people.
Awesome. So you've been in the mental health field for such a long time. What motivated you to become a therapist in the first place?
This is an interesting story.
We love that.
Yes, it's an interesting story. So my parents were getting divorced. That's a whole nother drama. But my father had a major stroke. Anyway, he ended up in a psychiatric facility just for like a little bit, just to get himself. He had a stroke, so impairments of all kinds. Anyway, I needed to tell him some very important information that my mom decided she didn't feel she needed to tell him. So I took it upon myself to tell him. And I met a social worker at the facility. And after that, I was like, I want to be you, because she was amazing. She helped me tell my dad something really awkward, awful, painful, uncomfortable, all this stuff. So I told this big secret. And it was because of the social worker that helped me. She absolutely supported me the whole time. She was amazing. And so it's that kind of weird, right? It's just like, it was like one of those freaky moments where I was like, I think I want to be like that. So I think that's why I like detective work. Why I like a lot of like what we do, because I mean, we have some stories that are quite insane. And I like trying to figure out how things go together. And so in my next life, I'm going to be a detective.
Honestly, I think you would have done a good job in that field now, considering how you are and how we are in the office when we talk about different cases and stuff, and you're just like, I think this. And I think it's because of this and this. Laura connects everything, which is amazing, because then it gives us like a different perspective to how other people may be thinking, and it's great.
Yeah, thank you. But I love that. Like, I am like, no, what is it? Criminal Minds. That's me. I'm like, hey, how does this, I don't understand this. How does this make sense? This must have been what happened, because otherwise I don't understand how this could happen. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just totally fascinated with it. And because we all do things, or things happen to us, not necessarily for a reason, but they impact us, and we move in the world that way, right? I mean, we move in the world based on what we have.
For sure. Now, again, so obviously it sounds like you've been through a lot. Now, are there any mental health struggles that you've gone through that might have motivated you to want to become a therapist?
Yep. My dad's whole family, he's the last of 11. Most of them had depression or bipolar disorder, but then it was not diagnosed, right? That was not a thing. But it actually runs in my father's family. One of my cousins, I think, worked in Johns Hopkins, because we're all from Baltimore. and worked at Johns Hopkins, and they actually did a study of the genetic components of depression and bipolar disorder, and used my family as a case study. And I found that the next generation, so me and all my cousins, also, most of us have depression or bipolar disorder.
Oh,
So when we all get together, we talk about, what medication are you taking? Well, I don't know. What medication are you taking? Does that work for you? I don't know. Does that work for you? And because they also found that medications that work for people and families, that's also a thing, that because it has a genetic component, that the same medication may help others. It's very fascinating.
That is fascinating.
that is interesting. And now I
Yeah.
wanted to go back to that big secret that you were holding in, right? I wonder if that created any resentments there towards mom at all.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yes. There's quite a bit of that. There's quite a bit of other people telling me things that really I think she needed to tell me about what was going on. Finding information out like secondhand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So as I get older, I'm more and more transparent.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I wasn't before, but I was not brought up to be that way. You know what I mean?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You
So
know,
you're breaking that generational trauma there.
I'm trying my best.
What we were talking about in the office the other day about being a proper lady.
Oh,
What?
okay. So my mom, the bling, the you name it, the nails, the bling, the whole, not like but like the refined, like the long red nails. We don't do like fancy nails or anything. We do like, um, try growing up with that. Just saying. Totally embarrassing all the time. I was mortified most of the time because I just wanted to be a regular kid.
Right. Did
Mm-hmm.
And
she give you that? I'm sorry to cut you off.
no, no, no.
Did she give you that pressure to have to look a certain way, to like have makeup done and hair done and your outfit all nice? Did she make you do any of that?
Okay, so it was kind of, I'm going to say, insidious, for lack of a better word. It was never thrust upon me. However, that was, I mean, I believe her dream was that I was going to be like that. And I was the opposite. I was overweight when I was a kid. I was not, I had curly, dark hair. I didn't look like my mom, who's like very petite and has like red, like red hair. She's kind of flashy, for lack of a better word. My father was not that way at all. So I was more like my dad, like understated, just like, just I don't need to draw attention to myself. Let me just like go through life and do what I need to do.
Now, you also said that you were overweight. Was that an issue growing up? Were you ever bullied? Was your mom saying things about your weight?
I wasn't that I remember. So this was like pre like bullying. I'm not sure today what that would have looked like, but I knew that my mom was not happy about how I looked. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm guessing now, here's my detective hat. I don't know then what I was thinking, but I'm pretty sure she was mortified. I was not the daughter that I'm projecting totally, but yeah, I don't think that she was happy about it. She would never say it because it's not okay to say, right? It's not okay to say that.
Like, would she make indirect comments to you at all?
Well, I don't, you know what? Maybe I dissociated. So maybe I don't remember, and she did. I had to wear uniforms most of the time. So that was like that, curbed that whole thing of like having to decide what I'm going to wear every day and have her pick on it. So I think that got me out of a lot, honestly. But you know what? I'm guessing that it must have been really uncomfortable for her to have a daughter like me. I'm saying that because I was not a diva. I was not interested in like bling and stuff like that. I was just like, and I had early trauma. Like I have early significant trauma. And now that I understand myself better, in light of that, that shadows probably almost everything Do you know what I mean? So once I started understanding that, it's like a different lens. Like I really think that a lot of things I didn't pay attention to, or I was trying so hard to be like the good kid, the good girl, all that stuff. I think a lot of times I was probably in survival mode and didn't realize it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and this was someone that my mother had brought into the house, a female cousin to take care of me. And so there was significant sexual abuse. So there you have it. At 8 years old, starting at 8 years old. So yeah, I'm being transparent because I now believe that that's how I understood. I didn't understand the world the same way everybody else did. You know what I'm saying?
No, of course.
Yeah.
And so how did you deal with this trauma?
Sorry, I didn't mean to like
No, of
trauma
No.
course. No,
way.
don't
No.
apologize. This is
Don't.
the purpose of this. Like we want to know these things, like what shaped you to be who you are today, especially as a therapist. So it's really important, and I really appreciate you for opening up to us about this.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't tell anyone till I was in my 20s. I didn't say a thing. I no, I didn't say anything because I didn't think anyone would believe me. Point blank. I didn't believe that my mother would believe me. Okay, so now I've like had this juxtaposition, right? I have this diva mom who looks a certain way, who wants to be seen a certain way, right? As like I do everything for other people. I care so much about other people to the detriment of myself, right? It's like I'm this wonderful person. Not that she's not. She's a wonderful person. But that was very important that people knew that. Even though underneath of it, she was very shy. And that's why I say there's probably a lot of insecurity. The person that was brought into my house, this cousin that was brought into my house, was, I believe, so this is an important part, was, I believe, what my mother would have wanted. And now
Interesting.
this is so blonde hair, blue eyes, was all into like, looking nice. And do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
so that's mainly the reason I didn't say anything. Because that's how I viewed it. I thought she was a favorite and I wasn't going to be believed. So I just like did what I had to do.
What gave you the courage to speak up about it?
Um, Another traumatic event. And then I decided, okay, I think all of this has been traumatic. I think it's time. And it was literally like totally inappropriate, like in the middle of the hallway in my house. I was like, well, you know what? I was, bleh, and then I just, because
Word
I think
vomit.
really getting on my nerves. The dam broke finally. I was like, all right, I can't do this anymore. You need to know what's going on. And there it was, all out there.
And your mom being who she is, how you've described her, how did she take that?
Okay, so this is the best part. This is what I was getting at. So when I told her, why didn't you tell me? Okay, first, that's her response. Why didn't you tell me? Not, oh my God, I can't believe it happened to you. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Oh, what can I do? No. Why didn't you tell me so I could do something? Okay, so you now believe that you have that kind of power, right? So, do you know what I'm saying? Like, what would you have done?
I
Right?
think, and obviously, like you're a mother. I'm not a mother, but having a mother who has said like, "Why didn't you tell me?" Like I could have done something. I resonate with that in the sense that I think the thinking process behind that is like they want to protect you. They want to make sure you're okay, and so them attempting to do something about it is their coping mechanism.
Right. I mean, I understand, but it made me mad. Like
Hmm. Oh,
I,
for sure, it would have.
I was like, I cannot believe that's what you're saying to me.
Hmm.
Like that was her. So with whatever I said, now comes like a tremendous amount of guilt on my mother's part
Oh, wow.
that she wanted me to somehow, you know, help her deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Not my there's a not my circus, not my monkeys. I don't know if you've ever heard that expression, but it's like that was not for me to do. Like that was not my place, really. But that was supposed to be my place, to make her feel better for what happened.
Is that something you two ended up working out?
Not really. I had to figure out how to be different. Like I had to be different in the world and figure out like, okay, that's why I became a therapist, right? So it was a matter of figuring out, wow, I was probably dissociated a lot of the time and didn't even know it. And so I don't remember lots of things. I am pretty sure that that's why. And so when I have clients that say they dissociate, it's very real, right? It's very real because I believe that that's what happened to me because that's the only way I made it, really, I think.
Now, being in the field that we are, and seeing the clients that we see and hearing the stories that we hear, do you ever have countertransference?
You know what? I don't believe that I have countertransference. I will believe you. I will not be that person that doubts you. And even if, in fact, it's something that didn't really happen, or you know what I mean? I'm not the one to determine that, right? Like, so if someone comes into my office and they come in for that reason, I'm never the one that says, did that really happen? Like, no, that's not okay. Why would someone make it up? Right? I mean, I have a hard time. I mean, there are people that make it up that are like dating football players and things like that and have ulterior motives. And then they make it very difficult for those people that really endure all this stuff to be believed because now people think everyone's like in it for money. I mean, that's like a different whole thing. But when kids walk in and say something happened, I mean, there is sometimes when I'm like, oh, well, that wasn't terrible. But then I stop. I say it in my head. I'm like, hold on. That's not for me to say. Like, if it was terrible for them, then it was terrible. You know, and then some of my clients have like the most insanely horrible stories. And I think because I had dissociated, I'm able to sit with it in a different way. Like I'm just like, okay. It impacts me later on, right? Like I don't realize at the moment, and then I'm like, I can't sleep, and yeah, it gets to me, but it doesn't really happen. The countertransference, it doesn't. And I truly believe it's because I am able to dissociate, honestly, and so I think that I'm able to show up in a different way. If that makes sense. I mean, I don't have dissociative identity disorder, none of that, but that was my coping strategy. That was how I made it through. For many people, that's the only way they've been able to survive, including myself. Because if you had to really think about this all the time, there's no space in your head. There's not enough space in your head.
There really isn't.
I always said, like, I feel like there's a big file cabinet in my head and like really good things and really bad things just like go there. Like I don't get really excited or really upset. Everything just goes somewhere. And now I understand that as dissociation.
Have you ever disclosed, not that it happened to you, but that you resonate with them?
I always say what we've gone through. So it's almost like what do they call it? Like the royal we, like, I add myself in so that I'm not disclosing anything, right? But I'm joining. Like I'm joining in a way that to me feels authentic. Do you know what I mean? Like when people go through stuff like that, when we go through like that. So whatever they think, I don't disclose anything. I will disclose that I had an eating disorder. I will disclose stuff that I go on with my kids because I want people to understand that parenting is parenting. I try to be completely authentic in the room. Like I am just who I am. And if a piece of information about me, I think is going to be helpful, I don't have a problem with it. As far as my abuse, no way. That's off limit. I don't need to dump that, right? I don't want to project that onto anyone else, right? That's not their thing. It's my thing.
Yeah.
And I know it, right? I know it. And of course, there's sometimes I want to say, I know what you mean, but I will say, I'm sure a lot of people go through that. You know what I mean? I like somehow try to figure out how to say it in a way that feels okay with me, that I'm not telling them anything.
When I started, Laura was the one that I was asked to see her intakes with, how they're done in our office, what we do, and essentially just like observe. First client I ever saw with
Oh,
her was a DID client. And I was actually very surprised that in the trauma department, we see DID clients.
so we must tell Ashley about this with
Oh,
men.
yes.
Okay. So the very first intake that Samantha sits in with me is, I mean, I'm telling you, like
Crazy.
the craziest, wildest. I was like shaking. I was like, I was traumatized. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe Samantha. This was a client who, I mean, from the minute she sat down, didn't stop talking, did not stop crying and dysregulated and a million stories all at once. First of all, it was like trying to follow what was going on. I moved here from Kenya and I was kidnapped and I was sex trafficked and you name it. And I was like, oh my God. And I remember looking at Samantha afterwards and Samantha's like, I think it's schizophrenia. I'm like, I think DID. And she's like, I'm not sure, because she reminds me of clients I work with. And so I didn't know any more than Samantha did.
Mm-hmm.
We were both like, oh my God, what just happened?
First intake, I think it was like my second day.
Yeah, I mean, it was outrageous. So I was like, okay, so Samantha dealt with that. She can deal with it. I mean, it was like, what do we believe? What do we don't believe? Oh my God, what's going on?
That's where her detective services actually like came into play. We literally had to dissect like what could have been the truth, what is made up, what could essentially like it was a puzzle that we needed to be just like, okay, we need to sit down and actually like think about this.
I mean, at one point, she told us that she was the head of a nonprofit organization, and another friend of ours Googled it, and it's a white woman with blonde hair. And my client is not a white woman with blonde hair. It's not up to me to figure it out. Like, I cannot figure out if all these things happen. But if she believes these things happen and she's this dysregulated, obviously a lot happened. Right? Like, I am not here to be like the truth teller. Like, I don't believe you. I don't believe you. Like, that's not, like I said, that wasn't my job, and it's still not my job. Like, I believe what she says, if and it turns out that it is dissociative identity disorder. She has other alters. She has like 5 cell phones for her different alters. And she may in fact have schizophrenia because her mother has schizophrenia. So we can't rule that out. But this was the first DID client that I really had in real life. And I was like seeing it and I was like, this has to be what's happening. Like, otherwise nothing makes sense. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she would find herself like drug running or in gangs or stuff like that. And that was her alter.
What does dissociation look like to
So
somebody that wouldn't know?
this client, it was like very obvious in a way. She literally split. The problem was is that she had always been misdiagnosed with bipolar 2.
From the get-go, we were like, she is not bipolar.
Yeah. So, I think a lot of people believe that bipolar is like split personality. But do you know what I'm saying? I believe that people don't understand bipolar. So when somebody's up and down or acting dysregulated, but she was not up and down. She was all over. She was this way, that way, that way.
I heard it from a few people that they didn't actually believe if DID was actually like a real thing.
Oh, people don't. They're psychiatrists.
And they're just like, oh, no, it's not real. Like, it's in the DSM-5, but it's not real.
No, and there's some psychiatrists that don't believe it. They don't really believe that that's something. That's a thing.
Until you see it with your own eyes, then it's like, oh, it's a thing.
And she has 2 primary. There's her and one alter that's like the primary alter. And I've met them both. And how I understand it now, with the help of one of the other supervisors, who's the assistant director, this is one of her specialties, is DID, is that in severe trauma, people have to compartmentalize different things that have happened to them in order to survive. So it's still a survival tactic. It's not easy to understand. I still don't understand all of it, but I see it. You know what I mean? I can see it. So like the part of her that was, that was sex trafficked and kidnapped and whatever, she can't walk around like that. You know what I mean? So that's, her name is Tanya, right? And then, this part of me, that her name is whatever. So everybody has different names, but the two main people are her as she presents herself, who's like kind and wants to believe the world is good and wants to believe people and, believe she's a good person. And her alter is, excuse my language, a badass, like takes no hostages, badass, like is in rap videos and is making provocative pictures and gets herself involved in like drug running and drinking and all kinds of stuff, which the problem is that it gets her into very serious problems. So it's her protector. This is her protector, right? This is the part of her that comes out and is like, this is not happening. She can't deal with it, so I'm taking over because I'm going to get stuff done. The problem is that she will go to an extreme and then her original personality will come back and she's in jail or she's in a psychiatric ward or she's in, right? And then she doesn't know how she got there and doesn't understand. So when somebody's telling you this, are you supposed to say to them, I think you're full of shit? Like, I don't feel like I'm in a position to say anything, right? Like, okay, so if this is what's happening, let's figure this out. Like, she loses track of time, loses periods of time, doesn't remember. And people were telling her she's blacking out. I'm sorry, but when you have bipolar 2, you don't black out. And we're talking like days. So she has all these phones, right? And she's on Instagram and all over the place. She sees pictures of herself like in the middle of a fight. Doesn't remember anything. People will be calling her. She doesn't know who they are. I'm not here to say to her that's not happening because I've seen it. Do you know what I mean? Like I have helped her understand that she's lost track of time and to help her understand that like when her alter comes out. And why her alter comes out. This is like real investigative stuff. Supervisors really helped me, but not so much because she's like very like cut and dry. Like, okay, so you do this and you do that. I'm like, no, but I'm figuring it out myself. You know what I mean? So I'll say to her, okay, look at your phone. Do you remember that? Okay, I want you to take out a notebook, write notes. What I'm helping her do is try to understand what she's never understood in her life. That she has blacked out, literally, like dissociated completely.
Yeah. It's essentially a trauma response too when it all starts because like they can't essentially deal with the trauma. So then they create that that personality, that protector to be there for them when they can't. And I remember working with somebody, the way they described it was like, oh, when I'm here, my alter is in the clouds watching over me. And then when something happens or when I don't want to be here, we swap. And I'm up in the clouds and I'm watching what she's doing. And it's a swapping method that you never know who is there and or who's protecting. And I remember when I worked with a client who had DID, they were there for months on end. They're like, yeah, they're not really ready to come back down. So I'm just gonna be here until they're ready, or maybe they might just never be ready to come down. And
Yeah,
so
it's absolutely 100% a trauma response. 100%. Because when you have endured this much trauma, and this person has been through such significant trauma that it doesn't stop. Right. So you need to, as long as you want to stay alive, you need to show up in some way. Right. So you need to hide those parts somewhere. And that's really what dissociation is that you're splitting your mind, your brain and your nervous system. This is nothing conscious. This is nothing conscious on anybody's part. Basically your brain and your nervous system have to figure out how to keep you alive. So a lot of times people develop female and male parts, they'll have children parts, I have another client that has DID, and her alters have never come out to me, but one of her alters is like a 10-year-old kid who speaks in a baby voice, right? So these are literally like parts of themselves that have not been able to speak out or have not been able to make themselves heard. So hold in a lot of anger or hold in a lot of stuff, but there wasn't enough room, right, to be all of those things. And there's no way to really explain it in a linear way. You have to see it in real time. Like you really have to just see it happening because it's real. And when I say I dissociated, I can literally say that in situations I felt like my head has been in the corner of the room and I'm watching myself. So that's very real. That's just, I needed to be somewhere else. It's like playing dead, right? So that's a trauma response where you like freeze, like the fight, flight, or freeze. You freeze because you just don't know what to make of it. Like it's just none of it makes sense. And so that's a lot of what we have to explain to our clients is that your body and your nervous system react in a certain way, and it's survival. It's all about survival.
And that's why I want to become a neuropsych clinician, because all that to me is just so interesting and I love it.
I'm so fascinated by it because there's so much going on in the brain. So much going on in the brain and neurotransmitters being rewired. I mean, when you are traumatized, your nervous system changes. It just does. The brain and the nervous system do what needs to happen. And Bessel van der Kolk is like the king of like, that's what he,
I know.
We
right?
know. We talked about him.
That's his thing. And I did a training with him. That's his thing. And I believe it 100%. Because when you meet people and you see what they've been through, nothing else makes sense. Do you know what I mean? Like nothing else really makes sense for people to react the way they do or to act the way they do. And so that's why I love doing trauma work, because while it helps me understand myself, it also helps me and help others understand that this is how our brain works to keep us alive.
When did you get your master's again?
I have a master's in Middle East politics and international law, and then I got my master's in social work in 1994.
So you've been doing this for quite some time.
Yeah.
So what I'm curious about is the training that you got when you were a master's student and you first started off compared to the training that is now. What are certain differences that you see? Because I know it's changed so much that a lot of clinicians who have more experience sometimes have a hard time adjusting to how trainings are now, how we do some things differently. So what are your thoughts on that?
So the even more interesting part is when I went to social work school, I was not clinical. Clinical was not my track. I was a social administration, community organizing, and social administration. So I was the social justice warrior. Like I was the one that was going to like save the world. So I was like Susie social worker saving the world. But when I graduated, all the jobs were clinical. Everything out there was clinical. So by the grace of God, I was hired because I could read and write Arabic. I can't anymore because I haven't practiced it, but I speak Hebrew and I can read and write Arabic. So I applied to jobs in San Francisco and New York because that's where I wanted to live. I was hired by a clinic in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, where there's a large Palestinian community because I could read and write Arabic. That's why I was hired.
Interesting.
So I just had to figure it out from there. I had no clinical I mean, I had the basics like human behavior and using the DSM and all that stuff. I used my life experience. Like I just I don't know. I didn't know what I was doing. No idea.
It's kind of like us, Ashley, since our track was essentially vocational counseling. And so we had a lot of employment counseling classes, what to do with assessments. So coming into the trauma department was a major like change for me. And I was like, okay, I have to learn as I go, because even though there are some things that they taught us, we had one trauma class. One.
Right.
And Professor Van der Kolk was one of the books that we read in that trauma class. And I was like, that was one of the things that was going through my head, like reading that book and being able to like resonate with that. So it kind of goes with what you were saying in the sense that you were kind of thrown into clinical work, even though you did something completely different.
You said that you had an eating disorder. Can you talk to me about that?
Oh, yeah. It's a control thing. And also, having a mom that said to me growing up, you can never be too rich or too thin.
Interesting.
Mm.
The attempt to be perfect went with the eating disorder.
Exactly. Exactly.
What do you do for your wellness to make sure that you're not in that headspace again? Or if you get in that headspace, how do you essentially get out of it?
So I think actually, I will say that my choice of becoming a social worker has also been my healing process.
Mm.
If that makes sense. Because I was hospitalized for the eating disorder. I went through the whole thing. So I feel like I have like real life experience. So if someone, like I have a couple clients, one of whom both of their daughters have eating disorders, I disclosed that I had one because to help them understand that where I'm speaking from is not from a place of up here. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I'm speaking from person to person, from a level playing field. Not that that's necessary, but for me, I'm I'm okay with that. So I was the one who decided I needed to go to the hospital. Nobody
Oh.
else. Yeah, I was the one. Okay, so you're gonna love this one. This is my favorite story of all time. So I finally figured out that, and I mean, I was seeing a therapist, I was seeing a psychiatrist. So everybody's watching this in real time. And my health was not at imminent risk. However, it was going on. And everybody was watching it in real time and nobody's saying anything. And finally, I was like, I think I need to go to the hospital. And I'm standing in my mother's house and it's all mirrors. And you all, after this, you're going to think, like, what happened to her? But so I'm looking at myself and I felt like I was going to crack in half. Like I felt like that fragile. So I was standing in the bathroom and I said to my mom, oh my God, I feel like I'm going to crack in half. My mother says, and I do not lie, oh my God, I really need to lose some weight too.
Oh, wow.
What is that all about? I'm literally about to go into the hospital to gain, I don't know how many pounds, because they don't tell you anything. It's a medical model, it's awful. But she decides that instead of like, wow, Laura, that must feel terrible or whatever. Yeah, I need to lose a few pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. So do you see what I mean? Like so you see the picture of my mom, right? It's like, it's not surprising that she would look at things like that in
Mm-hmm.
spite of knowing everything that happened to me, right? In spite of all of like the knowledge that she has about what I went through.
Mm-hmm.
So, honestly, the main reason I'm able to handle it all is having kids and not having enough room in my head for it. Right? I really just don't. I want to be a good mom and I don't, there's not enough room for me to be obsessive compulsive all the time about everything all at once.
Mm-hmm. Laura
So
loves talking about her children. She has so much love for them. I hear
I
so
believe
much
it.
about them, and they're from what you told me, they're great. They're amazing men. I'm sorry, I shouldn't even say kids. They're men.
they are not great.
Laura, can I tell you that I can relate to you when you say, for example, when you told your mom about the abuse and she was just like, why didn't you tell me? Instead of being like, oh my God, are you okay? Like, I've been through a situation too where I told people about it, and instead of everybody being like, oh my God, are you okay? It was more like, why did you tell people about it? So I get it because it's such a lonely feeling too.
Yeah, it's blame. It's a lot of blame and shame that just goes right back on you.
Right. And because of that, people saying like people making me feel bad for a situation that I went through, it made me feel like I was just a terrible person, or like I felt so much guilt and shame, and it was so lonely because nobody was checking up on me at the time. It was
Right.
just, I was just a bad person for opening up my mouth about what I went through.
Or like, how could you let that happen? How could that have happened? Or like, no, it's not exactly that way. Yeah, it's very distorted. It's yeah. And I think a lot of it is because people feel helpless. They don't know what to say, and probably they should just keep their mouth shut.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it would be more helpful, but
Just
people
a
always feel
bit.
the need to say something, and so those people that have like rescue fantasies, like they need to calm down. They
Yeah.
just go.
A lot of the time it's better to not say anything at all than to open your mouth. I'm the type of person that like when there's an awkward silence, I'm like, so and that's something I need to work on too. But essentially it's reading the room and being
Yeah,
able to say not everyone's perfect, obviously. Not everyone's gonna say like exactly what you want to hear, but at least be mindful of how you're saying it or what you're saying, of how it could possibly affect the other person.
yeah. Like I didn't think when my mom said it though, I just knew I was mad. I didn't
Mhm.
Yes.
know what I wanted her to say, but I
Mhm.
didn't like what she said.
Yep. Yep. And
That,
and I'm not gonna lie to you, like when that situation happened to me, like I was incredibly suicidal because of it, because everybody was like making me feel bad for what I went through, you know? And again, it was so lonely, and I was just like, this made me opening up my mouth made me feel worse than anything. So it's just like since everybody was saying, "Oh my God, why did you say this? Why did you do this? Why did you do that?" It's just like, all right, like I can't take this anymore. I don't want to be here on this earth anymore if everybody's just going to keep beating me up about this.
Mhm.
You know, there were so many emotions all at once. So
yeah,
I get it.
it's horrible. I mean, it's really horrible, and I don't know where it comes from. You know, I maybe you opened up a door of things nobody like wanted to talk about that they knew about,
Yep.
right? It's so loaded. Like,
Yep.
oh, whoa, we knew that was happening all along, but we never said anything. And now you're saying something. Oh my God, what do we do? Right? It like close the lid. So it's like that intergenerational trauma. That's why it keeps going on
Absolutely.
Mhm.
because
Absolutely.
nobody, and the person that opens their mouth is always the person that pays
Mhm.
the biggest price.
Now, let me ask you, you going through everything that happened in your life, is this something that you have chosen to talk about with your boys or like your
No,
family in general?
no, I have not. I've shared very little with them. Um, I not I'm not trying to keep secrets.
Hmm.
But I also don't want them to carry it around with them, right? I don't want them to see me in a different way. I mean, I have alluded to things that have happened to me that were awful, that were not fair and shouldn't have happened. And, you know, so that helps me talk to them about advocating for themselves and taking care of themselves and that we're not all perfect and that you need to speak up and that kind of stuff. But I don't want to burden them, I
Mhm.
guess is what I'm like, burden them with this information because they're both very sensitive in different ways. And so I don't think it's fair. I don't want to quote like trauma dump on my kids, right? I don't want to like, oh, well, guess what? This is what happened to me. I mean, and even when I had my second son, I almost died like 6 weeks after because I almost bled out and they didn't know why. But I've never told him. Like, I've never said, you know, we allude to it, but it's not like we don't say it. And I think one day I will. I
Mhm.
mean, I think one day I will, but right now, I mean, 20 and 23, like I want them to just think about themselves and where they need to be. And so I hope I'm not keeping secrets, but I'm also don't want to burden them with, oh my God, oh, my mom went through this. So whatever I'm going through isn't such a big deal. No, I don't, you know what I mean? I don't
Hmm.
want to do any kind of thing like that or see me as fragile because everybody sees me as, I mean, I'm always seen as fragile for whatever reason. And I feel like
Really?
punching. Yes,
I do
I
not see you as that at all. You,
feel like that. So I think
yeah.
that's why as I get older, I'm a lot louder
Hmm.
and I say what I think because oh, let's keep this from Laura. She can't handle it. If you only knew what I could handle, right? You have no idea, right? So this was before I disclosed everything. And even afterwards, I was seen, right? So you're talking about how you're seen after you tell something. So then I was seen as, and I've been suicidal. I've had, yeah, for sure. And oh, Laura's too, oh, we can't talk about that. Oh, we shouldn't talk about that. No, excuse me. Like, so that's what pisses me off more than anything else. Don't assume that because I've gone through this and I'm not tougher than you, actually, just saying.
And it's funny. Well, it's not funny. Sorry. It's interesting that you say that because I feel that with the things that we hear, the things that mentally we are capable of like holding and talking about with other people, um, as therapists, we are very strong individuals. At work, we're like these badass women that are doing this job that, we get to handle other people, and people tell us, oh my goodness, you're so like, I don't know how you do this job. You're so strong. But internally, like me personally, I don't feel that way. I don't feel like I'm this strong individual. I feel like, I still have my weak moments. I still have like all these things that will make me break down at any second. And so when that thing of like, oh, I feel strong, it's also contradicted by the, yeah, but I just cried like maybe like 20 minutes
Right.
ago.
Also, it's also, yeah, it's, you have to like convince yourself too. You have to like psych yourself up. Like, okay, I can deal with this. I mean, I find myself, like, nothing surprises me. And I have some, like, when I tell you, Ashley, I have some way out there cases, but I will go home and I will not stop thinking about it. Like, it will go like, through my head, like, oh my God. And I now dump it out. That's where I know I'm dissociating. Like, I can talk about it, like, with no problem, but I'm not internalizing it. And then later on, I'm like playing with fidget ball. Like, I'm like squeezing like stress ball.
Broken three.
Oh my God, I'm obsessed. My new
Oh,
obsession is stress balls.
yes, every week now I see like for the past 2 weeks I've come into my office and I see two new like stress ball like those fidget balls that have like the little tiny balls inside of it where you're just like, yeah, I've broken all of them.
Yeah, I've broken like 3 or 4, but they've been around for how long? Well, now it's an obsession. I sit on my sofa at home watching TV like this.
Yeah, it's like
Clearly, the work that we're doing is coming out in a certain way because I not stop squishing things.
Yeah. And I just started CPT. And that's Laura's specialty. And I've gone to her with so many questions of CPT, how we can do this, because honestly, it's still like a learning curve for me.
But
And
it's also more like being a detective, right?
mhm,
More like, okay, I feel this. I feel it was my fault. So you basically are saying to someone, okay, I understand why you would feel that way. People made you feel that way all along. You felt this way, that way, whatever. But what's the proof now?
mhm,
What's the proof? Do we have any proof now that what happened to you is really your fault? So it's like breaking down these stuck points that we have. Like, we grow up in our families and that's all we know, right? We
mhm,
know from our primary caregivers everything about the world.
mhm,
Doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean it works, doesn't mean it's like functional, but that's how we understand the world. So we're told certain things like, this is me, you're too sensitive. That was the famous thing. I'm too sensitive. And so,
if only people knew what we go through, because I get
but
that
you
too.
world believing you know what I mean? If the people in charge are telling you that's how you are, you believe it because you're a little kid. You don't know not to believe it. But so we all walk around with these thoughts about ourselves that may or may not be accurate.
Mhm,
And
Oh, Laura.
so
Oh, go ahead. Keep going.
what CPT does is it challenges that.
Now, Laura, knowing all the things that you've been through, where's your mental health at today on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the absolute best?
Um,
And if it's not at the best place, like what are you doing to help it?
it's not its best place. How I deal with it is I sit and watch TV. Honestly, I would love to say, oh, I read and I do yoga and all this stuff. No, I don't. I used to. I just sort of sit with it. But I can tell you that this is where dissociation is a bonus. All I'm saying is the fact that I'm sort of hardwired that way, and I truly feel that I am hardwired that way because of early experiences, that helps me. And that's the weirdest kind of explanation of dissociation ever. But I think that's how I get up in the morning half the time. I really need a trauma therapist. You need to like understand as much as Samantha and I understand. Like you need to understand it on a different level. That's why I'm helping my clients to speak on that level, to be able to say, yeah, this sucked. This happened to me. What have I learned from it? How can I get through it? Not get over it, but get through it. Right. So it's that's very different because most people are getting over it, but you never get through it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what advice would you give somebody that is trying to get into the mental health field?
To be kind to yourself, to believe that what you're doing is legitimate, that we all need it. Every single one of us could use somebody objective listening to our nonsense or whatever we have to say without judgment, without prejudice. Like that's what therapy, mental health is all about. Being a therapist is about being that objective person that's not judging you other than what you're telling them.
Thank you so much for coming on today. Honestly, like I know how nervous you were. I'm so happy that you came on and you talked to us and
And I didn't curse. I thought I was gonna like curse and be really
but I
like,
told you it was okay to do that.
that's good, right? I
You
behaved.
were, yes. No, you were great. I loved it. This was such a fantastic time. And honestly, I'm so appreciative that you were here and you were able to, that you felt comfortable to tell your story to us.
Yeah, for sure.
And you two are awesome. Samantha, you know, I think you're awesome. Ashley, you're also awesome. One day we'll have to meet in person. And
sure.
Actually lives in Jersey. Laura
what?
lives in Jersey.
I do.
Willing to
Love
say
it.
we're in Jersey, you know, it's all good.
I'm cool with that. I love that. All right, my dear. Thank you again so much for coming on. I really appreciate you being as open as you were with us. Sam, you have anything else to say? We're good?
Yeah, I think we're good. I think we've
Yeah,
covered a lot.
I just usually don't disclose all this, but I feel like if it's gonna help anybody.
Good for you. It will. It
It
absolutely
will.
will.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Of
Absolutely.
course.
All right, everybody, please like, subscribe, comment, share this with your friends and family. Listen to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Follow us on TikTok and Instagram, Therapists_Unmasked. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye.